Okay, geometry students, in this video we will be learning two ways to prove that two triangles are congruent. Now, before the chapter is over, we will have learned 5 ways to prove that two triangles are congruent. Okay? So 5 total ways we're going to learn during this chapter. Today we're going to look at 2 ways to prove that triangles are congruent. Okay? We will also be doing our first 2-column proof in this video today. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started, and here we go. Your heading today is SSS and SAS postulates. Okay, SSS and SAS postulates, lesson 5.2, and be sure to include today's date in your notes. Okay, so we're looking at the SSS and the SAS postulates. And we're going to learn later what this stands for and what this stands for. Okay? Alright, let's continue on. Take some really good notes, guys. Okay, here we go. Let's go ahead and take a look at our first postulate. Okay? You are responsible for this postulate, so write it down and make sure you learn this. Okay? Here it is. We call this the side postulate, and now you can see why we call it the SSS postulate. Okay, the side postulate, and it reads as follows: if 3 sides of one triangle are congruent to 3 sides of a second triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. Okay, if 3 sides of one triangle are congruent to 3 sides of a second triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. Now, here's what this is saying, and please take some really good notes on this. Watch this, okay? In your notes, let me fix this here real quick. In your notes, go ahead and copy this down, okay? Draw a triangle that looks something like this, only hopefully yours will be a little better than mine, and then draw a triangle that looks like this. Actually, I can do a little better than that, so there we go. There we go. Now here's what this postulate is saying. This postulate is saying that if this side here is congruent to this side here, and this side here is congruent to this side here, and this side here is congruent to this side here, then I know for sure that these two triangles are congruent. You say, oh, Mr. Earhart, we know that for sure, even though we don't know anything about the angles? Yes, most definitely. We know for sure that these two triangles are congruent because their 3 sides are congruent. And that's a really cool shortcut to know, okay? Now, let me show you how we know this. Just kind of watch. You don't have to take notes on this, but just kind of watch this. Look, it's common sense, students. If I told you I had a side this long and a side this long, and the same thing over here, a side this long and a side this long, and then the third side had to fit right in here, and of course then the third side had to fit over here, it's kind of common sense. And that's why it's a postulate, not a theorem, because we don't prove postulates. We just accept postulates as truth. It's just common sense that these two triangles are congruent. Now, I want to show you something else you really need to see here. Please watch this. We cannot say the same thing about angle. I could draw a real small triangle like this that has 60, 60, and 60 for the angles. And I could draw a really big triangle like this that had 60, 60, 60 for the angles. And notice these two triangles they're definitely not what? Congruent. There's no way, okay? So even though this angle here was congruent to this angle here, and this angle here was congruent to this angle here, and this angle here was congruent to this angle here, the two triangles were not congruent, okay? But one thing we do know is that when three sides of one triangle are congruent to three sides of another triangle, then we can state for sure that these two triangles are congruent, okay? Now let's go ahead and do this. Let's take some more notes here, guys. I want you to go ahead and call this side here A, or this angle here A. Call this angle here B. Call this angle C. Call this D, E, and F. Now remember, in our past video, we were learning how to write congruent statements, okay? And that's where you matched up congruent angle with congruent angle. The problem is we don't know what angles are congruent with what angles. So when you're given side, side, side of one triangle, congruent to side, side, side of another triangle, you know the two triangles are congruent, okay? Thus, if you know that, then you know the angles are congruent too. The problem is we don't know which angles are congruent with which angles. So let's see if we can figure this out really quickly, okay? Now watch this. Do you see how angle A here is made up of this side here and this side here? And notice this side here is the 1 mark side, and this side here is the 3 mark side. So come over here and find the 1 mark side, here it is, and the 3 mark side, here it is, and ask yourself what angle is formed by the 1 mark side and the 3 mark side. Well, angle D is. So that tells us right there that angle A corresponds, key word, corresponds with angle D. Now, let's take a look at angle B. Angle B is made up by the 1 mark side right here and the 2 mark side right here. See that? 1 mark, 2 mark. Now come over here. What angle is made up with 1 mark and 2 mark? Well, angle E. Here's the 1 mark side. Here's the 2 mark side. That's angle E. So I know that angle B corresponds with angle E. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that. 2 marks here and 2 marks here. And now, of course, the third angle left over has to go with the other third angle left over. So 1, 2, 3. And now, look how easy it is to write your congruent statement. Triangle ABC is congruent to triangle. Let's see. Here's A with 1 mark. Here's D with 1 mark. So D. Next is B. And B has 2 marks. So next over here is E, because E has 2 marks. And then lastly, of course, would be F. So there we go. So let's pause and let's relax here and let's take a look at what we've learned. We have learned so far that if I tell you that 3 sides of one triangle are congruent to 3 sides of another triangle, then we know for sure the 2 triangles are congruent. And once we know that 2 triangles are congruent, then we know the angles are also congruent. Okay? So if 3 sides of a triangle are congruent to 3 sides of another triangle, then those 2 triangles are definitely congruent. Okay? Alright, you got to know this, guys. You have to know that's really, really important, okay? Alright, moving on. Now, I want you to copy this in your notes. I'm going to pause a second while you copy this down, okay? Can we state that these 2 triangles are congruent? Can we state that these 2 triangles are congruent? Okay? I would like you to copy this in your notes, please. This triangle right here. Copy this down, please. Do the best you can in your notes to copy this down. Can we state that these 2 triangles are congruent? Well, students, one of the best things to do is to draw the 2 triangles by themselves, okay? Like this. Watch this carefully. Take some really good notes on this, okay? That's not a very good triangle. We'll try it again here. There we go. There we go. And there we go. Now I'm going to pull this red triangle down here. Okay? Now, and you can do the same thing in your notes if you want to. I would encourage you to draw the original problem like it was drawn, and then to draw the triangles by themselves, like I've attempted to do, and not done a really good job, okay? Alright, now, I'm going to call this G. There's G here, H, and I, okay? Over here, this is H. From this point here, this is I. From this point here, and this is J right here. Now, I see one mark here, put one mark here. I see two marks here, so I'll put two marks here. I see two marks here, so I'll put two marks here. I see one mark here, so I'll put one mark here. Now, here's the question. Can we state for sure that these two triangles are congruent? The answer is yes. Wow, Mr. Earhart. Look, guys, this side here is shared by both triangles. HI is shared by both triangles, so I know for sure that this length right here has to be the same as this length here. It has to be. It's the same segment. So I can put 3 marks here and 3 marks here. Now look what I have. I have 3 sides of one triangle congruent to 3 sides of another triangle. And we just learned back here in our SSS postulate, we just learned that if 3 sides of one triangle are congruent to 3 sides of another triangle, then the 2 triangles are congruent. So yes, I can definitely state that these 2 triangles are congruent. By what reason? Side, side, side postulate. Do you see it okay? Look it over, guys. Make sure you really understand this. So again, anytime the 3 sides of one triangle are congruent to 3 sides of another triangle, then we know for sure that those 2 triangles are congruent. Okay? All right, moving on. Now, before we go on to our other postulate, we need to first of all talk about a phrase called included angle. You need to know what that means, okay? So, take some really good side notes here, students. I want to explain to you what the phrase included angle means. Now, write this triangle down in your notes, please. And I'll pause a second while you guys do that. Go ahead and copy this triangle down. Okay. And let's just go ahead and call it triangle ABC, just to give it a name. Now, what does the phrase included angle mean? Well, it means this. Please watch this carefully. See this side right here? See this side here? If I ask you what is the included angle between this side here and this side here, you would say this angle here. And that's so obvious because this is the angle here that is between these 2 sides. So we call this the included angle between AC and AB. Okay? Now, look at this side here and this side here. What would the included angle be? Well, it wouldn't be this angle here. It wouldn't be this angle here. It would have to be this angle here, because angle B is the angle between these 2 sides. So we would say angle B is the included angle between sides AB and CB. Okay? Now, one more quick example here. How about this side here and this side here? What is the included angle between those 2 sides? Well, this angle here. So we would say angle C is the included angle between sides AC and BC. Okay? So it's very important you understand that, students. Okay, when we say included angle, it's the angle between 2 sides. Okay? Now, having said that, let's go ahead and take a look at our postulate. Now, here's our second one and our last one for the day. Okay, so please copy this down. Here we go. So, side angle side postulate, and we call this the SAS postulate. Okay. If 2 sides and the included angle, so there's that phrase, okay? So if two sides and the included angle of one triangle are congruent to two sides and the included angle of a second triangle, then we know for sure the two triangles are congruent, okay? So go ahead and copy this in your notes. You are responsible for this. You do need to know this, okay? So copy this down. This is the side angle side postulate. If two sides and the included angle of one triangle are congruent to two sides and the included angle of a second triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. Okay, let me show you what this means, all right? Take some really good notes. Take some really good notes on this, guys. Here we go. Okay, now look at this carefully. Let's go ahead and call this triangle here, I guess we'll call it cat and dog. C-A-T and D-O-G, okay? Now, if I told you this side here was congruent to this side over here, and I also told you this side here was congruent to this side over here, copy this down, please. And I told you this angle here is congruent to this angle right here. Then look what I have, guys. Please watch this carefully. I have a side, then an angle, and then a side. Do you see it? Side, angle, side of one triangle congruent to side, angle, side of another triangle. And anytime that happens, then I know for sure that the two triangles are what? Congruent. I know that for sure. This is such a cool shortcut. So from now on, anytime that I know that a side, angle, side of one triangle is congruent to side, angle, side of another triangle, then I know the two triangles are congruent. That's really, really helpful, okay? Now, having showed you this, and please take some really good notes on this, watch this for a second, please, guys. Look, don't get confused. If I told you that this side here was congruent to this side right here, okay? And I told you this side here was congruent to this side here. And then I said this angle here is congruent to this angle here. Look carefully, students. Look, you don't have side, angle, side. You have side, side, angle. Or you could say you have angle, side, side. But that's not side, angle, side, guys, okay? Look. Over here you would have side, then a side, then an angle. Or if you wanted to, you could say that you have angle, side, side. Either way, angle, side, side, or side, side, angle is not the same thing as side, angle, side. So don't try to prove that two triangles are congruent when you have a situation like this, okay? You can't do that, all right? So notice very carefully, it has to be, now watch this, students, it has to be two sides of one triangle congruent to two sides of another, and then the third part has to be an included angle. That means it has to be the angle between these two sides, okay? It has to be an included angle, all right? Now, having said that, real quick, I think I had this side marked with this side, and I believe I had this angle here marked congruent with this angle here, and I believe I had this side here marked with this side here. Now, having done that, by the way, students, Are you guys able to mark the rest of the parts congruent? Now that we know for sure that these two triangles are congruent, then we know that the rest of the parts of this triangle here have to be congruent with these parts over here. So we know for sure the third side has to be congruent to the third side. We know that. Now be careful here. See this angle C? Angle C is made up of a side with 1 mark and a side with 3 marks. Okay? So what angle over here is made up with 1 mark and 3 marks? Angle G. So angle C and angle G are corresponding angles. So I'm going to put 2 marks here and 2 marks here. And of course the third angle here has to be congruent to the third angle here. You see, students, listen, once you know that two triangles are congruent, then you know for sure that the rest of the parts of this triangle here have to be congruent to the other parts over here. And now that we've drawn this correctly, we can very easily write a congruent statement. Triangle CAT is congruent to triangle, no, let's see, angle C's first, it has 2 marks. So the angle over here with 2 marks is G. Okay? And then the second angle is A. Angle A has 1 mark, so the angle over here with 1 mark is O. Okay? And the last part is D. Okay? Sounds a little blasphemous. Sorry, I did not mean for it to be this way. Okay? But anyways, triangle CAT is congruent to triangle GOD. Okay? So there we go. So students, here's what we've learned today so far. We've learned that if 3 sides of one triangle are congruent to 3 sides of another triangle, then we know right away the 2 triangles are congruent. Okay? And we've learned that if 2 sides of one triangle are congruent to 2 sides of another triangle and the included angles are congruent, then we know for sure the 2 triangles are congruent. Now, very quickly, I want to show you how this is kind of common sense, okay? And then we'll move on. Now look, guys, this is a postulate because it's just common sense. Look, if I told you I had a length of 10 and a length of 12, and this angle here is 50, and then over here I draw a length of 10, and I draw a 50-degree angle and a length of 12, whatever third side you put right here, students, is definitely going to be the exact same length as this side over here. It has to be, okay? And then obviously the 2 triangles are congruent. And so that is how we know for sure that side angle side works, okay? So if 2 sides of one triangle and an included angle are congruent to 2 sides of another triangle and the included angle, then we know the 2 triangles are congruent, okay? All right, moving on. All right, here's where we get into 2-column proofs, and these are really, really, really difficult, so please take some really, really, really good notes, okay? This will be by far the hardest thing we've done yet this year. So go ahead and do this for me. Go ahead and write down in your notes. Go ahead and put the word given, and then put a colon, and then list all this stuff out, okay? That's what you're given. This is what you know to be true right here, okay? This is what you're trying to prove right here, okay? You're trying to prove that these 2 triangles are congruent. So take a second and go ahead and copy all this down. And then after you've done that, copy this down, okay? I'll give you just a minute to do that. Okay, copy all of this down, please. Copy this down just like it is. And then copy this down just like it is, okay? Okay, here we go. If you're still copying stuff down, then keep working. That's fine. But we're going to go ahead and get started on the problem. Now, whenever you're given a two-column proof, the first thing you do, students, is you pick up your given right here. You pick up your given and you put it on the diagram, okay? So, we know that JL is congruent to NL, okay? So JL, 1/ is congruent to NL, 1/, okay? So we're given that this segment here is congruent to this segment here, okay? All right, now continue on. We're also told that L is the midpoint of KM. So even though it doesn't look like it, we're told that L is right in the middle of KM. So if L is right in the middle of KM, then we know for sure that this segment here, think about it guys, if L is right in the middle of KM, then we know for sure that KL is congruent to LM. It has to be. Okay, so all that we did so far, it's very simple, is you pick up your given and you transpose it or put it on the diagram over here. Okay, pretty simple. Everybody got it? Now here's what you do next. Next, you set up kind of a chart, okay? And you put the word statements right here. So go ahead and write the word statements. And then you write the word reasons right over here, okay? Reasons. There we go. Now, draw this down, draw this across, and here we go. What you do first is you always write your given over here. So we're going to write JL is congruent to NL. And L is the midpoint of KM. Now, students, over here, you always put the reason that you wrote this over here. So why did you write this? Well, Mr. Eric, you told us to. I know that, but why are we allowed to write this over here? Because it was what? It was given to us. It was your given. So you put the word given over here, okay? Now, let's see if we can state some other things. Our goal is to do this, students. Our very last step down here, whatever number it's going to be. Now listen to me carefully, guys. My very last step down here, whatever number it's going to be, is to write this. Go ahead and copy this down. My very last step should always end with what I'm trying to prove. And I'm trying to prove that triangle JKL is congruent to triangle NML. Now I'm not sure what number this is going to be, what step, so let's put a circle there, okay? Now over here for my reason, how am I going to state that two triangles are congruent? Well, we just learned two ways to do it. So I know my reason is either going to be side, 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 or it's going to be side, angle, side. It has to be one of those two reasons, because so far those are the only two reasons I've learned to prove two triangles are congruent. This makes sense so far? Let's start over, okay? The first thing you do when you're given a problem like this and you're told to prove something by using a two-column proof, the first thing you do is you take your given right here and you put it on the diagram. The second thing you do is you write your given right here and you put the word given. Now, students, look what I have so far. I know that this side here is congruent to the side here. I know that. It was given to me. And I know that this segment here is congruent to this segment here, because L is the midpoint. So guys, the only thing I need left to prove these two triangles are congruent is to either prove this side here is congruent to this side here, and then I would have side, side, side of one triangle congruent to side, side, side of another triangle, or I could prove this angle here, we'll call it angle 1, is congruent to angle 2. And if I could do that, then look what I would have. I would have side, angle, side of one triangle congruent to side, angle, side of another triangle. Now that's the route I'm going to go, students, and here's why. Look at this, students. We learned this a long time ago this year. When two lines intersect, their vertical angles are congruent. So look what I have here. I have an angle here with one dot and an angle here with one dot. Those two angles are congruent because we've learned whenever two lines intersect, their vertical angles are congruent. So look what you have up here, guys. We have a line here and a line here intersecting. They're intersecting, so I know for sure this angle here is congruent to this angle here. I know that for sure. So what I'm going to do is this. Now this is your first proof you've ever done. This will be really difficult, but just watch and take some notes, okay? If I put a 1 here, call this angle 1, and call this angle 2. Looks more like a line. Hold on a second. Angle 1, angle 2. Now watch what I can do in my proof here, guys. Watch this carefully. For step 2, I can state the what? I can state that angle 1 is congruent to what? Angle 2. Now give me a reason. How can you state that? It has to be something that we've learned, either in a postulate or a corollary or a definition or something, a theorem. Well, here it is. We have learned that what? Vertical angles are what? Congruent. We know that. So there's your reason. Now look at this. Look what else you can state. I can state that KL is congruent to LM. Look, KL is congruent to LM. How can I state that? What's my reason? Well, look at what you've written so far. Look, what is L? L is the what? The midpoint of KM. L is in the middle. So over here I'm going to put this. I'll copy this down, okay? Definition of midpoint. That is what you would have to put, okay? Definition of midpoint. Because, guys, we learn, remember, over here on your reasons, this side over here, you have to use stuff like you have to use stuff like theorems or corollaries or postulates or definitions. Well, we learned that the definition of a midpoint is a point that divides a segment in two equal parts. That's the definition of a midpoint. So if L is the midpoint, which we know it is because that was what? It was given to us. If we know for sure that L is the midpoint, then we know for sure that KL is congruent to LM by the definition of midpoint. So look what you've stated, students, so far in your proof. Look at what you've stated. You stated JL is congruent to NL, so this congruent to this. Look what else you stated here. Angle 1 is congruent to 2, so this angle here is congruent to this angle here. And look what else you stated right here. You stated that KL is congruent to LM. So you have side, angle, side of one triangle congruent to side, angle, side of another triangle. So you're done. This is step 4. Since you've listed all of this, then we can state the triangle JKL is congruent to triangle NML. And what would the reason be? How did we do it up here, guys? Did we use side, side, side? Or did we use side, angle, side? Well, hopefully you can tell we used side, angle, side. Side, angle, side of one triangle is congruent to side, angle, side of another triangle. Okay? So there it is. We did it. Okay? So that is a two-column proof. And you know what? They're difficult to do. And I will not give you a ton of these on your tests and quizzes. I will be very, very reasonable. But that is how you do a two-column proof, okay? Let's try one more. All right, just one more. And then we're done for the video, okay? So here we go. Now, if you want to try this one on your own, feel free to. You can work ahead if you want to. But before you work ahead, let's go ahead and copy this down here. Copy down your given. Okay, copy down your proof part. And then copy down the diagram here. Okay, I'll give you a second to do that, and then we'll go ahead and prove this together. Or you can work ahead if you want to. All right, here we go. Now, students, look, first of all, we're going to pick up our given, and we're going to put it on our triangle over here, okay? So here we go. Angle Q is congruent to angle S. So I'm going to put a mark here and a mark here. Then we're also told that QT is congruent to TS, okay? There we go. Now, this is going to be interesting. They want us to prove that this triangle here is congruent to this triangle over here, right here. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. First of all, we've picked up our given, and we've put it on our diagram like we're supposed to. So next, let's go ahead and put the word statements for our statements. Okay, then we'll put the word reasons for our reasons. Okay, so far so good. And you know, students, on a test or a quiz, I give partial credit. All of you can pick this up and put it on the picture over here. And all of you can always put step one. Step one is just your given, okay? So anyone can go like this. Angle Q is congruent to angle S, and segment QT is congruent to segment TS. Okay, anyone can do that. Now, students, I know in the end here, I'm going to have triangle QRT is congruent to triangle SRT. Now, my reasons for that is going to have to be that I've only learned two ways to prove that triangles are congruent. So it's either side, 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 or side angle side. Okay, let's take a look and see here. Well, I know for sure that this side here is congruent to this side here, and I know for sure this angle here is congruent to this angle here. Man, if I could just get this, if I could just prove that this side here was congruent to this side here, then I would have side angle side of one triangle congruent to side angle side of another triangle, and that would be super helpful. And you know what? I can do that. Look at this. Remember what we learned, guys? A while back, we learned this. Let me get a clean page up here. We learned that if two sides of a triangle are congruent, then their opposite angles are congruent. So this angle here would have to be congruent to this angle here. And we also learned the converse of that, in which if two angles in a triangle are congruent, here it is, then their opposite sides are congruent. We learned that. So we know this side here has to be congruent to this side here. Well, look what we have, students. We have this, look, we have this angle here is congruent to this angle here. Now just pretend for a second, that we don't have this line here in the middle. Pretend it's not there, okay? just ignore for a second. Okay, there we go. Look what you have, guys. You've got a big triangle with this angle here congruent to this angle here. And remember, when two angles in a triangle are congruent, then their opposite sides are congruent. So we can definitely state that this side here is congruent to this side here. We can definitely state that. Do you see that? Because anytime you have two angles in one triangle congruent to each other, then the sides opposite those angles will also be congruent. So, let me go ahead and put all this back up here real quick. I can definitely state in my proof that, now watch this, QR is congruent to what? RS. And what would the reason be? Well, it was a theorem that we learned that said two angles in a triangle are what? Congruent. There we go. That's all you got to put for the reason. I'll know what you mean if you put that, okay? We know that this segment here is congruent to this segment here. We know that for sure because two angles in a triangle are congruent. So they're opposite sides. I guess you could put opposite sides are congruent. There we go. Now look what you've stated in your proof, guys. You stated angle Q is congruent to angle S. So we stated this. We stated QT is congruent to TS. So this is congruent to this. And then we just stated that QR is congruent to RS. So we just stated this side here is congruent to this side here. So look what we have. We have side, angle, side, congruent to side, angle, side of another triangle. So we can definitely state this. This is step 3. The next thing we can state in our proof is triangle QRT is congruent to triangle SRT. And the reason would be side, 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 or a side, angle, side. Which one would it be? Well, hopefully you can see it's side, angle, side, congruent to side, angle, side. So it would not be this one here. It would be this one right here. Okay, there we go. That's it, guys. So that's all we're going to look at today. Now, let me quickly review this, okay? We learned today that if you know for sure that 3 sides of one triangle are congruent to 3 sides of another triangle, then we know for sure the 2 triangles are congruent. And then we learned that if I know for sure that 2 sides of a triangle are congruent to 2 sides of another triangle, and their included angles are congruent, then I know for sure the 2 triangles are congruent, okay? And then, of course, we did our first ever 2-column proofs, and those are tough. Guys, if you're feeling really nervous about these, if you're like, wow, I didn't really understand those at all, that's very normal for the first time, and we'll practice these, okay? But at least you can do some things. You can always pick up your given and put it on the diagram over here. You can always do that. You can always start off by listing your given right here, okay? And you can always jump down to the end and put what you're trying to prove down here, okay? Alright, I hope this has made sense. I hope this video has been a help to you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call or email.